One of the best and most convincing pieces of evidence that extraterrestrial civilizations have visited Earth could be the epic Nuremberg space battle of April the 4th, 1561. It was recorded either in 1561 or 1566. Different sources provide different information. All the retellings of this story focus on the woodcut picture and a vague summary of events that occurred that day. The emphasis is always on crashed spaceships and space battles. Almost everywhere you read or hear the story, it goes like this. The inhabitants of the city woke up early on an April morning and saw a staggering celestial show that looked like a real space battle. This story sounds even more convincing when you find out that some objects allegedly fought for quite a while. And some even crashed. You can see them in the lower right corner. Look at the picture once again. Orbs and crosses fighting, a giant arrow and bizarre tubes, crashing ships. Wow, that had to be a spectacular cosmic battle. To make it all more plausible, Hans Glaser, the artist behind the woodcut, was a very real person. He really did woodcuts, and this one is indeed from the time and place that it says it is, meaning it's not fake, and it does depict a real event that had its own witnesses. For all intents and purposes, it looks like very convincing proof of aliens visiting us, but don't get your hopes up. A superficial perusal of facts seems to confirm an extraterrestrial presence on our planet. But the most likely explanation is much more mundane. The Nuremberg 1561 UFO battle is just an atmospheric phenomenon called a sundog, or parhelion. A sundog is a concentrated spot of sunlight that can sometimes be seen to the right or to the left of the sun, or even on its both sides simultaneously. Sundogs often appear as a pair of patches of light with subtle colors at the same altitude over the horizon as the sun. They can have a variety of forms, from colorful spots to patches of light so intense and bright, it looks like there are two additional suns in the sky. Sundogs are weird looking enough to make it seem that something scary and otherworldly is going on in the sky. At the same time, it's just our planet's atmosphere or ice in the upper parts of the sky acting as a prism or reflective device. This prism makes the light from the sun or moon do weird things. This image can help you visualize the phenomenon. Apparently, Nuremberg had the perfect conditions for this phenomenon to occur. If you examine the depiction of this event and compare it with modern pictures and videos, you'll soon realize that a sundog is indeed a more likely explanation than the galactic empire paying us a visit. Let's find the proof of this statement in the translated description of these events and in the woodcut picture itself. First, the sun showed and was seen with two blood-colored half-round strokes, like the diminishing moon right through the sun, and in the sun, above, under, and on both sides, stood blood-colored and partly bluish, or iron-colored, also black-colored round orbs. Now here's the photo of a sundog. It has a halo surrounding it, and a red orb. And if we have at least one red orb, there could be others showing up during other events. Plus, keep in mind that sundogs are like prisms. So, depending on how light is reflected, there could be multiple colors present during such a phenomenon. Now, referring to circled plates mentioned in the description, those could be halos. For example, this sun halo looks vaguely plate-like, and it seems to be linked to other sun halos. And indeed, people have seen halos with multiple orbs. Some of the orbs could have taken a cross-like shape. If we watch some modern videos of sundogs, we might notice that the orbs on film are sun-colored. But since the Nuremberg event happened between 4 and 5 a.m., the clouds and the sun could have had reddish and orange hues. As for the fighting, it could be as simple as one shape moving a bit and changing shape along with the movements of the sun. It could have looked as if it was pushing the other shapes out of the way. Do you agree with the scientific explanation? Or do you prefer to think that Earth was visited by guests from a galaxy far, far away? Write your opinion in the comments.
Imagine this. Long ago, in the depths of prehistory, aliens visited Earth. Yep, that's right. According to ancient astronaut believers, intelligent extraterrestrial beings made contact with humans thousands of years ago. And not only that, those alien visitors influenced the development of our cultures, religions, technologies, and maybe even our biology. All those divine beings in many ancient religions? Well, some say they were actually aliens with fancy tech, mistaken for deities by early humans. The pyramids, Stonehenge, Easter Island statues, all alien handiwork. At least that's what they claim. Ancient astronaut believers often claim that humans are either descendants or creations of those extraterrestrials. Aliens supposedly came down from the skies and kickstarted our civilization. To back up their theories, these believers point to so-called out-of-place artifacts. They take ancient artwork, legends, or even unusual archaeological finds and say, look, that's proof of alien contact. Mainstream historians and archaeologists, of course, have different perfectly reasonable explanations for all this stuff, but ancient astronaut enthusiasts aren't convinced. Instead, they argue that gaps in our historical records and the mysteries we can't explain must be the work of extraterrestrials. So, how about we hear them out? The most famous proponent of ancient astronauts was Erich von Däniken, the author of the pseudo-scientific book, Chariots of the Gods. He popularized the theory that many ancient deities were actually aliens. He even suggested that those extraterrestrials were light-skinned and Aryan in appearance. Uh-oh. At the same time, the notion of ancient aliens didn't start with von Däniken. It traces back to the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Early sci-fi novels like Edison's Conquest of Mars and the works of H.P. Lovecraft first toyed with the idea. The concept took off in the 1950s, gained even more traction during the space race in the 60s, and became a worldwide phenomenon. And even though many critics discredited von Däniken's work by the 70s, his influence was strong in fringe circles. Surprisingly, scientists today agree that the idea of ancient astronauts isn't impossible, but they add that it's definitely unnecessary. The so-called mysteries of history can all be explained through science, archaeology, and good old human ingenuity. No aliens required. But ancient astronaut believers often point to religious texts, suggesting that myths about gods descending from the heavens are actually tales of aliens arriving on Earth. Take, for example, the Sumerian myth of the Anunnaki. Some people interpret it as aliens coming to our planet to mine gold and creating humans as their slaves. In Hindu mythology, there are flying vehicles called vimanas, which believers say are actually ancient spaceships. Now let's finally figure it out. Did aliens visit ancient humans? Well, some people think so, and they believe the Bible might actually have proof. For example, in the Bible's book of Genesis, there's a story about the sons of God marrying the daughters of humans. Their kids were called the Nephilim giants who roamed the planet. Some Christians think these sons of God were just different families of Adam and Eve's kids. But others, as well as ancient astronaut theorists, argue that those were actually aliens who mated with humans, creating half-human, half-alien hybrids. The King James Version of the Bible even translates Nephilim as giants. In the Book of Enoch, which adds more detail to Genesis, it says that 200 angels, known as the Watchers, came to Earth, bred with humans, and taught them all sorts of things like metallurgy, magic, and astrology. Those angels, disobeying God, were eventually locked up, and God sent a flood, aka the story of Noah's Ark, to wipe out the Nephilim and the humans who had learned forbidden knowledge. Ancient astronaut believers think that this story is about aliens who were supposed to simply observe humans but broke the rules and got involved, and their offspring are the very Nephilim half-alien giants. Some also say that modern UFOs carry those fallen angels or their descendants still roaming our planet today. Let's move on. In the book of Ezekiel, the prophet described a wild vision of a huge fiery cloud with strange creatures and wheels sparkling like gems. Those beings had 4 faces, wings, and shiny bronze legs. The wheels with the help of which they moved were full of eyes and could go in any direction without turning. Sounds pretty sci-fi, huh? Ancient astronaut theorists believe Ezekiel described a spaceship, possibly piloted by extraterrestrial beings. This idea has been floating around, pun intended, since the 1950s. Some theorists also claim that the Ark of the Covenant, the sacred chest that held the 10 Commandments, was some kind of advanced alien technology. The same goes for other biblical objects like the Urim and Thummim used for divine communication. In the 1960s, some authors suggested that many biblical events, including miracles, were really alien tech at work. Even more shockingly, Barry Downing, a Presbyterian minister, even argued that Jesus himself was an extraterrestrial. He pointed to certain verses where Jesus said, "I am from above." The minister believed that it could have been the proof that Jesus had been an alien visitor. Some proponents also suggested that the biblical idea of hell could actually be the description of the planet Venus. The theory goes that ancient aliens might have shown early humans photos of Venus's fiery, inhospitable surface, and that inspired the idea of hell. They also claim that God and Satan were alien beings who disagreed on whether humans should be given forbidden knowledge. Others compare this to the Greek myth of Prometheus, the hero who gave humans the knowledge of fire. Some even say that the original sin in the Bible, when Adam and Eve disobeyed God, was actually about alien offspring mixing with early humans. But hold on, there's even a claim that the Book of Invasions from Irish mythology, which talks about the arrival of the Tuatha De Danann, is actually about aliens arriving in Ireland. According to the legend, they came in dark clouds and caused the sun to disappear for 3 days. Ancient astronaut theorists think this could be a reference to spaceships with cloaking devices. Now, some people think that ancient artwork is full of clues that aliens visited Earth a long time ago. Let's dive deeper into the details. Ancient astronaut believers point to cave drawings, especially those from the Hopi and Zuni tribes, that show Kachina's certain spirit beings and say they might actually represent star people, which means extraterrestrials. They argue that similar drawings found around the world are proof that aliens visited many different ancient civilizations. There are also examples from places like Australia and Italy. Drawings there look a lot like astronauts with dome-shaped helmets. Some people think those cave pictures show early humans encountering aliens wearing spacesuits. Another source of potential evidence comes from medieval and Renaissance paintings. Ancient astronaut fans claim that many artworks from this time show UFOs. For instance, in Madonna and Child with the Infant St. John, there's an odd object in the sky that people say looks like a flying saucer. You'll find more in other famous paintings like The Annunciation by Carlo Crivelli, Holy Trinity by Bonaventura Salimbeni, and Miracle of the Snow by Masolino da Panicale. However, experts like Italian art historian Diego Cuoghi argue that these objects aren't UFOs whatsoever. They symbolize religious ideas like angels, radiant clouds, and others. One of the most popular ancient astronaut claims is based on the Nazca lines in Peru. These huge ground drawings, depicting animals and geometric shapes, can only be fully seen from high above. Some think they were created according to instructions from aliens, or that the long lines might even have been runways for their spaceships. At the same time, archaeologists say there's no proof of this. They think the lines were actually used for ancient ceremonial purposes. One researcher even recreated a figure using just simple tools to show how they could have been made by the Nazca people themselves. But wait, there's more to consider. Some artifacts like the Saqqara bird from Egypt and the Cambay artifacts from Colombia, Ecuador, are said to look like modern planes or gliders. Ancient astronaut believers think these might have been models of alien spacecraft, even though mainstream archaeologists are sure that they're just stylized representations of birds and insects. Then how about sites like the Pyramids of Giza, Machu Picchu in Peru, Baalbek in Lebanon, Stonehenge in England, and the Moai statues on Easter Island? They often get linked to the idea of aliens. These structures are so massive and precisely built that humans of the time couldn't have made them without help from extraterrestrials. Mainstream archaeologists don't agree and say ancient people had the skills and manpower to move even huge stones. There have been experiments showing that large megaliths can be transported using simple ancient technologies. And still, some believers argue that the sudden rise of ancient Egypt's advanced civilization, and especially the construction of the pyramids and the Sphinx, was due to extraterrestrial influence. Now look at these massive Moai statues on Easter Island. They have puzzled people for a long time. Some ancient astronaut believers say there's no way humans could have moved such heavy structures without using alien technology. But in the 1980s, a group of researchers figured out a method that involved using ropes that made the statues walk across the landscape with the help of just a small team of people. But how will you explain this fact? Some ancient cultures, including the Egyptians and some Native Americans, used to artificially lengthen the skulls of their children. Ancient astronaut believers think they did this to mimic the appearance of extraterrestrials, whom that they might have seen as deities. Pharaoh Akhenaten and his family, who are often depicted with elongated heads and other unusual features, have also sparked theories of alien influence. Scientists believe that such features were probably caused by a genetic disorder due to inbreeding, which was common in royal families. Akhenaten was known for worshipping the sun god Aten, and some suggest his focus on the sun could be tied to a disease that sunlight helped relieve. Now let's get one thing straight. Mainstream scientists and archaeologists are not buying ancient astronaut theories. They call this whole thing pseudoscience, arguing that such wild claims often twist, misinterpret, or even outright fake evidence. The Pentagon has recently released a report, and according to the New York Times, they haven't found any evidence of aliens, spaceships, or visits from extraterrestrials. Last summer, a former U.S. intelligence officer named David Grush claimed at a congressional hearing that the U.S. might have been hiding secret programs for decades to detect and study aliens and their tech. He even said the U.S. had pieces of alien spaceships and even actual alien remains. However, the 63-page report put together by the U.S. Department of Defense's Anomaly Resolution Office says that since the 1960s, people have been confusing American spy planes and drones with UFOs, or what they now call unidentified anomalous phenomena. Pentagon spokesperson Patrick Ryder said they were keeping an open mind, but found no proof of aliens or hidden government programs. He mentioned that most sightings were just normal objects or misidentifications. In February last year, after a few unidentified flying objects were shot down over the US and Canada, an interagency group was created to look into the whole UFO situation. At the time, John Kirby from the National Security Council noted that this phenomenon had been around for a long time, but previous administrations hadn't really tried to explain it. Now, why is the ancient astronaut theory so popular? The human brain needs an easy way to explain incomprehensible things, and blaming them on some extraterrestrial powers is a simple way to do it. The supporters of the theory often take fragments out of historical and cultural contexts, ignoring the broader meaning of those pieces. Plus, they assume that alien technologies must be similar to ours, and that aliens must be interested in the same things as humans, which would be very unlikely even if aliens existed. The ancient astronaut theory, despite its popularity in certain circles, is classified by the scientific community as pseudoscience since it does not comply with the principles of the scientific method and is often based on distortion of facts or false analogies. At the same time, come to think of it, the universe is unimaginably huge. Does it really sound possible that in the vast, constantly expanding cosmos, we're the only intelligent, technologically advanced civilization? What do you think? Write your opinion in the comments.
Now, let's assume that another species, whether humanoid or dolphin-like, could have existed millions of years ago. How do we find their traces? There was a Doctor Who episode about a non-human industrial civilization on Earth that existed long before us. These reptiles, called Silurians, were forced deep underground by a catastrophic rise of temperatures on Earth, and there they thrived for centuries. That inspired scientists to create the so-called Silurian hypothesis. If there was an advanced civilization before us, we should find their traces somewhere. Well, let's try. Climatologist Gavin Schmidt and astrophysicist Adam Frank decided to dive into this themselves. Like us, any technologically advanced civilization would be hungry for energy. So they looked for global effects that would leave a widespread mark. For example, hints of large-scale industrial processes, like plants and factories, and their leftovers. Then comes the question of how long these civilizations would last. If they existed for a long time, we should look for long-lasting signs, like residues from burning fossil fuels, mass extinctions, synthetic chemicals not found in nature, and even traces of nuclear fission. Basically, we should search for the same kinds of things that humans are currently leaving behind as evidence of our activities. Unfortunately, this evidence isn't that easy to find. Let's imagine an unsettling scenario if humanity suddenly disappeared. Even though it seems like we've left a lot of changes on our planet, the future civilization millions of years from now would struggle to find any remnants of our existence. Why? Well, our planet has existed for 4.5 billion years. Complex life on Earth has existed for more than 400 million years. Compared to that, our industrial period only lasted around 300 years, and we haven't left any significant traces. Our record of Earth's history is full of gaps, especially the further back you look. The fossil record captures only some things, being very selective and incomplete. On average, one fossil emerges every 10,000 years, and dinosaur footprints are even rarer. Mountains rise, oceans change, and plate tectonics can easily wipe out evidence of entire civilizations. After a couple of million years, chances are any physical signs of a civilization would disappear. In order to find at least something, we have to look for things like odd sediment patterns or unusual isotopic ratios. Also, fossils mostly form in water, leaving us in the dark about creatures on land or in the jungles. So even if there was a technologically advanced society millions of years in the past, and even if they were far more advanced than us, we might struggle to find any clues of its existence. Frank and Schmidt try to understand how we could ever hope to spot signs of them. Discovering actual cities would be the ultimate proof of a Silurian-style civilization on Earth. But Adam Frank isn't too optimistic. Even now, our cities cover less than 3% of the surface, making it easy to miss ancient city ruins. Whether a city survives over tens of millions of years depends on whether the land around it is sinking, getting locked into a rock, or rising, getting worn away by rain and wind. So, places like the French Quarter in New Orleans might have a better shot of making it into the geologic record than, say, Haight-Ashbury in San Francisco. When it comes to finding artifacts, the odds are pretty slim as well. No prehistoric iPhone would survive millions of years, fancy glass or not. Finding their fossilized remnants might be a bit more promising, but it's still tricky. Considering modern humans have only been around for about 100,000 years, it's quite possible that we might overlook any traces of an earlier advanced species. There is one thing, though. We could stumble upon their traces in rocks. Our current chaotic era might leave a distinct mark on the Earth's geological history, especially since we're basically experiencing PTM 2.0. I'll get to that in a moment. So they try to look at the changes in the carbon cycle. Humans have been releasing a lot of fossil carbon since the 18th century. This leaves a special mark in the carbon isotope ratio, like a signature that shows the difference between carbon in living things, such as seashells, and carbon in lifeless volcanic rock. Scientists also look for signs in the way sediments are arranged. Large coastal deltas might mean that there were bigger rivers made by folks in this hypothetical civilization. Traces of nitrogen could suggest big-scale farming, where they used a lot of fertilizer. Spikes in metal levels in the sediment could mean runoff from heavy industries. Of course, a single find like that wouldn't tell us anything. Schmidt says the key is to look for multiple signs together. Without clear artifacts, the uniqueness of an event might show in various clues rather than a set of changes linked to a single cause. On a quest for Silurian-style clues, scientists even decided to check the Moon. Some astronomers find it surprising that no one has looked into this before. They even joked about the possibility of dinosaurs building rockets and leaving traces on the Moon or other celestial bodies. These astronomers think that Earth-like planets tend to erase signs of civilizations on their surfaces. So they're exploring the wild notion that these beings might have been space travelers. In that case, remnants of their technology, known as technosignatures, could be lurking not only on our Moon, but also on asteroids, or even buried on Mars. There they might endure for millions or even billions of years. Unfortunately, so far, despite digging into the past 380 million years and examining all suspicious events, the researchers haven't found a clear match for a technological civilization. They don't give up, though. Frank calls for more investigation. For example, we could study how modern industrial chemicals stick around in ocean sediments. This, he believes, could help us identify similar chemical traces in the Earth's history. If there are no traces, why do we even bother to find something like that? This research is based on Schmidt and Frank's recent papers. They were delving into the Anthropocene. It's the proposed epoch dominated by human activities on Earth. It's full of these things called hyperthermals. They're prehistoric events when temperatures on Earth sharply increased over a relatively short time. They're like extreme heat waves from the past. A great example of this is the Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum, or PETM for short. It happened around 55.5 million years ago and saw a rapid rise in global temperatures. Over 200,000 years, the average temperature on Earth jumped from about 9 to 14 degrees Fahrenheit. We studied these hyperthermals to understand how they occurred, from natural causes or human activities. So, these hyperthermals sparked the genesis of Frank and Schmidt's research. To study them, scientists started examining chemical signals and tracers left in rocks. When doing that, Schmidt and Frank uncovered some eerie parallels between all the climate issues we have today and past periods of rapid temperature shifts. There's a close similarity between the PETM and other hyperthermal events. So all this work isn't just about solving a historical mystery. Understanding our impact on the environment can guide us to finding better ways to live in harmony with the planet and avoid becoming a forgotten species in the future. Our Milky Way is filled with lots of planets that could be just right for life, but we don't know if there are other civilizations out there. Earth is the only place we know of with living beings. About 200 years ago, people wondered if there might be civilizations on Mars. Back then, it was a real question, but once we got pictures from space probes, we decided there wasn't any evidence for it, and that idea got stuck in our minds. Now, it's not even considered a valid topic for serious science. It's seen as kind of silly. But no one has set clear limits on what could have happened on our own planet a really long time ago. So, even if there is no proof, we shouldn't throw away the possibility. Don't forget, it took humanity a while to recognize dinosaurs. Maybe Silurians are just patiently waiting for their time.
We all know some iconic symbols. The Statue of Liberty screams USA. The Eiffel Tower represents Paris. And this mask? Undoubtedly, it's Tutankhamun's, right? Sometimes it feels like historians have squeezed every last drop out of the King Tut story. But guess what? The most obvious details often slip right under our noses. Like the fact that this famous mask didn't actually belong to him, nor was it ever meant for him. Stick with me for the details. Can we get a close-up of that mask? Thanks. See those holes? Yep, they're for earrings. And no, it's not that they had anything against jewelry, but back in ancient Egypt, earrings were typically worn by high-status women or kids. Now, if you know your history, you might say, but Tut was a boy king, wasn't he? You're spot on. He began his reign at just 9 years old. Sadly, that didn't last long as he passed away at a very young age. So when he was 9, he might have worn earrings, but he probably took them off when he hit that no earrings age. Sounds reasonable, right? Actually, not quite. That would have been pretty strange since nobody expected him to pass away young. Certainly not at 9. So no one was preparing a kid's mask for a burial. It's this untimely demise that suggests that the mask used was simply the best option available when Tut passed away. There are more clues pointing to the idea that the mask was found in a hurry. Let's think about this. Even though Tut was mummified and his body could wait a bit, his loved ones wanted him to reach the afterlife ASAP. Some experts even believe the paint in the tomb was still wet when it was sealed. But look at his mask. It's a masterpiece. There's no way it was made in a rush. It's way more elaborate than other simpler cartonnage pieces. The renowned mask of King Tut stands 21 inches tall, adorned with precious stones, and features a golden beard that weighs 5.5 pounds, making the entire mask 22.5 pounds. Okay, I'm a bit confused here. So it seems like it was probably a kid's mask, but it had a beard? I've never seen a 9-year-old with a goatee, and I'm guessing you haven't either. Just think about it. A grown man's face compared to a kid's face. Fun fact for you, our faces pretty much stopped growing at the age of 16, so by 19, Tut would have definitely had the face of an adult man. Can you imagine trying to fit a relatively small kid's mask on a grown man? That would have been super embarrassing, and no one would have let that happen. Right, let's dismiss the kids' theory. Now, the second option. If you remember, is that the mask could have originally belonged to a woman. This is where the beard theory comes into play. Some researchers believe the beard might have been added later on. Here's another twist. What if the mask was actually made for Nefertiti herself, who ended up maskless? In this case, there are two discoveries. Two birds with one stone. For now, it sounds like a conspiracy theory, I know. But let's give it a shot and delve deeper into the details. So, Tut passed away in around 1323 BCE, probably due to malaria. He had other health issues too, like when he broke his leg, and records suggest he wasn't in the best shape. As for Nefertiti, we have no solid data about her demise. Plus, nobody knows exactly when or where she was buried. The supposed year when she passed away is around 1330 BCE, but she could have lived longer, and the mask was intended and prepared for her. Or maybe they just took her mask right from the burial chamber. After all, they were family. Well, sort of. She was said to be his stepmom, having been married to Akhenaten, who was likely Tut's father. But this is not 100% accurate. Some scientists doubt it. Ah, these ancient Egyptian families. It's hard to keep track of who's who. I know, you're not yet convinced that Tut wore a lady's mask. Let me share one more theory with you. Meet Howard Carter, the enthusiastic archaeologist who discovered Tutankhamun's tomb. It was located in the Valley of Kings outside Luxor and, to everyone's surprise, was nearly intact. When he entered, he noticed something odd. This didn't feel like a pharaoh's burial chamber. It was classy and all, but it had a vibe that suggested it was made for a woman. Typically, Egyptian pharaohs had larger tombs that suited them better, and even more strangely, it was oriented to the right of the entrance. This didn't add up. That orientation was typical for female chambers, which Egyptian queens used. Another red flag was that the chamber appeared to have been built in stages, and all the artifacts, around 2,000 of them, seemed hastily placed there. Even more curious, they looked like they were meant for other royals. Carter discovered this burial site in 1922, but it remained a mystery as to why it was so bizarre. Almost a century later, Nicholas Reeves thought he may have solved the puzzle. He claimed that King Tut might not have been the original resident of the tomb. Instead, he suggested that the undisturbed resting place of the legendary Queen Nefertiti could be hidden behind the walls of the boy king's burial chamber. Nicholas studied high-resolution photos for months, meticulously examining every pixel. One day, he focused on detailed scans that revealed the texture of the tomb's walls beneath layers of paint. He spotted what he believed to be outlines of two doorways that had been blocked and plastered over to hide them from view. The more he looked, the more it seemed real. Could it be a tomb within a tomb? Nicholas theorized there was a hidden storeroom behind the western wall of King Tut's tomb, and his chamber might just be the outermost section of a larger corridor-style network of rooms. It all sounds fancy, but sorry to break it to you. Reeves' theory was debunked. To find out if he was onto something, experts had to use ground-penetrating radar to see the unseen. Reeves' idea was that if there were gaps, it could indicate the presence of additional rooms. And at first, in 2015, one expert even thought he had found a hidden room. But the glory didn't last for long. A year later, after double-checking, it turned out there were no hidden doorways. By the way, Nefertiti isn't the only legendary woman from Egypt whose burial site remains a captivating mystery. There's a cool legend about Cleopatra that you might enjoy. It's said that she once declared, "No man will ever find my tomb." Kind of fitting, right? After all, the person who's come closest to uncovering her final resting place is a woman. Fast forward a few millennia after she passed away, and while no man has located it, archaeologist Kathleen Martinez believes she might have cracked the code. She's been on the quest for Cleopatra VII's tomb for nearly 20 years, and recently discovered a bust that she thinks represents the famous queen. However, not everyone is on board with her claim. Some experts argue that the bust doesn't resemble Cleopatra at all. Alongside this intriguing marble statue, Martinez's team also unearthed 337 coins, some of which, less controversially, feature Cleopatra's likeness. But the real part is that it's still not officially confirmed. There's no doubt about the existence of the small bust. It's carved from white marble, fits in one hand, and shows a woman wearing a royal crown, according to a translated statement from the Egyptian Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities. The big question, though, is who it actually depicts. While Martinez insists this statue is a representation of Queen Cleopatra VII, many other archaeologists argue that the facial features don't match, suggesting it likely belongs to a princess instead. Sorry, I can't resist the temptation of breaking the magic for a moment. Some folks believe that the whole idea of "no man will find my tomb" is misunderstood. Even if she did say it, what she probably meant was "no living soul," and it wasn't about gender at all. It can as well be just a beautiful legend. Toodaloo!
When you hear the word mummy, you might get a chill down your spine. That's because most of us associate this word with those creepy characters we've seen in some scary movies. But in reality, mummies have helped us understand a lot about ancient civilizations, their rulers, and about how people used to deal with losing their loved ones. The people most famous worldwide for their mummies are the ancient Egyptians. They believed that some sort of existence after passing away was possible, if certain conditions were met. That's why they insisted on preserving the human body through the process of mummification and placing the mummy in a furnished tomb, kind of like giving it a fully functioning apartment of its own. Why did they believe in this? Well, because they were deeply connected to their natural environment for the most part. They saw the natural cycles around them, like how the sun rose every day, followed by the moon, or how new life was always sprouting from plants, even after they had wilted away. They also believed that the powerful spirit Osiris, who represented the cycle of passing away and resurrection, played a role in this process. To prepare for the afterlife, the ancient Egyptians followed certain rituals, like mummification, which involved using materials like honey, resins, and incense to preserve the body. There's no other mummy more popular than that of King Tut. He was a young pharaoh who ruled over 3,000 years ago in Egypt. The problem with discovering ancient royal tombs is that most of such burial sites were previously robbed. People knew ancient rulers had been left with many valuable belongings, so those locations became vulnerable to thieves. When King Tut's tomb was opened in 1922, people were excited because it had not been robbed, like many other previously discovered royal tombs. That's how well hidden it was. Inside, his mummy was encapsulated in a total of 3 coffins, including one made of gold. The objects found in his tomb showed us what ancient Egypt was like, and studying his mummy also helped us learn about the culture and practices popular at the time when he passed away. We also learned about his family by looking at his DNA. Scientists were able to discover that he had had a disease called malaria and a problem with his foot that might have made it hard for him to walk. Ramses II was another pharaoh in Egypt who ruled for 68 years, which was quite a lot back in the day. He was known for his expansion campaigns and building projects. Many objects from his time as a ruler still exist today, including a large statue of him. Ramses II was about 6 feet tall and lived to be about 90 years old. After looking at his mummy, scientists concluded that he may have had a medical condition that affected his spine. Now, remember those thieves I mentioned before? They are probably the reason why Ramses II ended up in a plain coffin in a secret collection of royal mummies at Deir al-Bahari, which was rediscovered in 1881. Thankfully, archaeologists were able to identify him because his journeys had been recorded on his wrappings. The process was really tedious too. In fact, in ancient Egypt, the mummification process could take a staggering 70 days to complete. A special person would say a very specific speech while delicately handling the body and drying it out using a type of salt called natron. They also used linen and resin to make the body look more lifelike and to wrap it in cloth. The tomb was equally as important for ancient Egyptians. The walls of King Tut's tomb, for example, were adorned with intricate artwork that depicted his journey to the afterlife, from his burial procession to his passage through the underworld. The ancient Egyptians believed that everyone made this journey after passing away, and they filled their tombs with items and paintings to help the person in their spiritual travels. Additionally, the walls of the tomb were decorated with spells from a special book, which contained a collection of poems that the Egyptians believed would help people reach the afterlife. And speaking of how important this journey was, people also placed food in these ancient tombs. In King Tut's tomb, archaeologists discovered 36 jars of vintage beverages and 8 baskets of fruit, which were believed to be left there to help him in his journey to the afterlife. The Egyptians believed that traveling to the afterlife took a really long time, so they left a lot of supplies, such as food and water, to sustain their loved ones. Pharaohs also generally had numerous luxurious garments and beautiful jewelry in their tombs to ensure that they would have a fashionable journey. These items included various types of linen clothing, such as tunics, scarves, gloves, and headdresses, as well as a lot of gold jewelry with precious stones, like bracelets, buckles, pendants, necklaces, rings, and even precious depictions of insects for protection. Some were also deposited with fans made from ivory and ostrich feathers to keep them cool in the afterlife. Some ancient rulers were even placed in their forever apartments along with boats. For example, Pharaoh Khufu built the Great Pyramid at Giza as his tomb, and a large ship was found inside. King Tut, however, was buried with multiple boat paddles, but no actual boat. Instead, he had 3 chariots and numerous walking sticks made of precious materials, perhaps indicating he'd rather travel to the beyond by land, not by water. Amongst the most interesting objects found near ancient mummies are bottles of oils and perfumes. If rulers were supposed to be fashionable, why not smell nice too, right? Also, some of them had some ancient kinds of board games, most of them made out of precious materials like gold or ivory. One of those games was called Senet. It was very popular amongst the ancient Egyptians and very similar to modern-day chess. The ancient Egyptians may have the most famous mummies out there, but they weren't the first to invent the procedure. In fact, it all started in South America with an ancient civilization named the Chinchorro. As far as we know today, these people were the first to mummify their loved ones that had passed away. They did it somewhere around 2,000 years before the Egyptians started their own rituals. Sure, we can tell a lot about ancient rulers by studying these mummies, but until recently, we had no idea what they really looked like during their lifetime. Not so long ago, though, some very special mummy paintings were found by archaeologists studying ancient Egyptian objects. These mummy portraits are highly detailed paintings of individuals that were made while they were still alive. Such paintings were often painted on wood, as opposed to the classical portraits we all know about, which are painted on canvas. They are known for their realism and beauty, and have even been used by researchers to diagnose diseases by comparing them to the corresponding mummies. Some of these portraits also include depictions of jewelry, which was later found on the mummies. The recent discovery of these mummy portraits in Central Egypt is significant, as it marks the first time in over a century that such paintings have been found. Mummies appeared all around the world naturally, too. Mummification can occur without people intervening because of natural conditions, like extremely cold or hot environments, places with a lack of oxygen, or accidental exposure to chemicals that preserve the body. These conditions don't allow bacteria to grow, resulting in the body remaining more or less intact. Famous Otzi was one of these mummies. We know today he was a man who lived around 5,000 years ago in Europe. But upon his discovery in the Alps in 1991, Austrian authorities initially believed that he was a modern mountaineer because of how well preserved the body was. However, after the Iceman was removed from the glacier, it was determined that he was actually from the Copper Age.
Ever since Plato wrote about the allegory of Atlantis, humanity has been fascinated with the possibility of the discovery of a thriving underwater civilization. Fancy joining me on a trip to a few historic underwater sites? Let's see what we can find out about ancient civilizations. The first one on our list is what is being called the underwater Stonehenge. Scientists have recently discovered a mysterious pile of cairns that stretch for miles under the shimmering waters of Lake Constance at the borders of Switzerland, Germany, and Austria. Archaeologists began to explore the site back in 2015, and they haven't been able to understand yet what it was actually used for. What they do know is that there is a 12-mile line of 170 human-made stone cairns under Lake Constance. Scientists say this was most likely the result of a combined work of several villages. The cairn site was probably used for some collective purpose. The formations are huge. Some of them are several dozen feet wide. The most amazing discovery so far is that the site dates back to around 5,500 years ago. Now, what were we humans doing back then? We were living in the prime years of the so-called Stone Age. We were beginning to make artifacts from stone and use them to hunt and eat. Can you imagine what a knife and fork might have looked like back in those days? It's no coincidence that scientists call this site the underwater Stonehenge, though. Both sites are believed to have been built around the same period of time. You see, Stonehenge dates back to around 3100 BCE. Both sites carry the distinct characteristic of stone monuments built in a circle. Not to mention the fact that scientists also haven't figured out why on earth our early ancestors would feel the need to build a monument such as Stonehenge. Well, the mystery of Lake Constance hasn't been solved yet. Who were the Neolithic people from this area? And for what purpose did they go through such an amount of work and effort to build this huge stone site? Next, we're taking you on a tour of the Ryukyu Islands just off the coast of Japan. You're diving deep down to an archaeological site. But I should warn you, the waters of the Pacific Ocean are far from smooth. It doesn't take long before you see a huge structure, thanks to the sunlight shining down on the seabed. At first, it looks like Machu Picchu's ruins located across the globe in Peru. As you approach the site, you slowly figure out its forms. A pyramid-shaped structure, arches, staircases. It's something that could have easily been a palace or a castle. Could this be a sign of human activity? What you've just seen is known today as the Yonaguni Monument. It also goes by the name of Japan's Atlantis. The entire monument is about the size of 5 soccer fields and the height of a 5-story building. Its most surprising feature is its expanse of terraces. Explorers and scientists believe that Yonaguni might be 10,000 years old. But whether it's a human-made structure or a natural formation is still under debate. For Japan's top marine geologist, Professor Masaki Kimura, Yonaguni is the heritage of a lost civilization. Kimura has dived to the bottom of the ocean to explore the ruins over 100 times over the past 10 years. According to him, there are clear signs of human activity down there. On the monument's surface, there is a triangle-shaped concave that is a historical symbol of water fountains in the region. There's also a giant turtle carved on the eastern side of the structure. And, according to Kimura, turtles have an important cultural meaning. Several pieces of stone tools have been recovered from the site. Their estimated age is around 10,000 years. However, not all scientists support this theory. For many, Yonaguni is the result of thousands of years of erosion. The fact that the monument is composed of one massive rock leads them to believe it's not human-made. The defined edges and flat surfaces resemble a natural formation in Northern Ireland, known as the Giant's Causeway. The basalt columns look like the ruins of a palace, but they're actually the result of volcanic activity in the region. Now, you're flying to the coast of Greece, 4 hours away from Athens. More specifically, you're in the Peloponnese Peninsula. You dust off an old snorkel and head for a free dive on a bright sunny day. Sometime into the dive, you start noticing patterns on a seabed. 13 feet below the surface, outlines of familiar objects start to appear, one by one. As you continue swimming, what looks like the outline of an entire city emerges in front of your eyes. Are you wondering how water could have taken the whole city? Rocks are perfectly aligned into what appears to be the foundation of a building. This is Pavlopetri, an ancient city you've probably heard about for the first time. It was discovered by Nicholas Fleming, a British oceanographer, when he was on vacation in Greece. He had heard rumors about Pavlopetri's existence and indeed found several artifacts on the seafloor. He went back to the area a year later with the team. They found a site filled with pots, storage vessels, and tools. A kernstone, for instance, is a tool used for grinding grains and turning them into flour. Multiple amphoras indicate that this settlement dates back to the Bronze Age, 5,500 years ago, when people started living in towns. The settlement is believed to have existed for over 2,400 years. Today, Pavlopetri is considered the oldest submerged town ever discovered, and what's impressive is that it wasn't a simple village. It was a vibrant port city with stone buildings, a marketplace, streets, and even squares. The next stop on our voyage is one of today's most famous underwater cities that has been turned into an archaeological park. The city of Port Royal in Jamaica exists only below the surface, but in 1692 it was one of the wealthiest cities in the Western Hemisphere. Port Royal was the center of the British Empire at the time and an important trade city that attracted people from all over the region. It was also home to real-life pirates of the Caribbean. On the morning of June 7, 1692, the people of Port Royal met a different fate than they had probably expected. The city woke up shaking. People were thrown out of their beds by the power of a massive earthquake, ranking 7.5 on a Richter scale. One survivor said he had seen Earth opening up and swallowing the whole town. What he said could be true, as the city was mainly built on sand. The ground swallowed buildings, roads, you name it. Geysers erupted, and finally, waves as big as 10-story buildings hit the city. About 33 acres of the city disappeared under the water. Amazingly, most of its 17th century remains are still in good condition under 40 feet of water. Archaeologists have found taverns, storage rooms, kitchens, and recreational buildings used for diverse purposes. You can also see a grand lion statue, a submerged bridge, and many picturesque arches. Of course, I saved the best for last: India. Just off its coast lies another sunken marvel. A site known as the Lost City of Cambay is located in the Gulf with a similar name. It remained undiscovered until 2001, when the National Institute of Ocean Technology made a routine water assessment. With the help of sonar technology, which sends a wave sound to the bottom of the sea, they found something far beneath the surface. Images showed well-defined geometric shapes spread along a 5-mile stretch. The remains date to more than 9,500 years ago, meaning this civilization was lost at around the end of the Ice Age. Debris recovered from the site included construction material, pottery, beads, sculptures, and even bones. Scientists argue whether these artifacts are indeed from the site, but if they truly are, then the lost city of Cambay might be the oldest civilization in the world.
The Great Pyramid was created as the final resting place of ancient Egyptian monarch Khufu. According to legend, French leader Napoleon entered the Great Pyramid and came back out looking shaken and super pale. He never revealed what he saw inside, but whatever it was is said to have affected him for the rest of his life. When Napoleon entered the pyramid, he would have walked through a super tight and ascending passageway. He'd then go through another passageway, known as the Great Chamber. This corridor would have been much taller than the previous one, and would have cobbles too. He'd then reach the King's Chamber, the centerpiece of the Great Pyramid, which was lined with huge blocks of granite. But it wouldn't have looked as grand as we might imagine. There are no hieroglyphics decorating its walls, as Egyptians only began decorating the burial chambers of pyramids much later on. The pharaoh's tombs deep inside the pyramid would have also been filled with treasures, from chunks of gold to the world's most expensive jewelry. But this would have all been looted a long time ago. The only thing that probably would have been left in there would have been a huge sarcophagus, which would have once contained the king's mummy. He'd also have to walk past the queen's chamber. This room most likely didn't hold any queens though, as pyramids were usually only built for one person. There are mysterious tunnels leading from here. To this day, no one is really sure what they're there for. And that's not the only mysterious and creepy thing Napoleon may have encountered, as stories of pharaohs leaving ancient curses on pyramids go way back. Many pyramids had warnings written on the outside, telling of horrifying things that would happen to those who entered and disturbed the peace. We might not know what exactly Napoleon found in the Great Pyramid that scared him so much, but we know for sure what was found in Tutankhamun's tomb. Tutankhamun was an ancient Egyptian pharaoh who was only 8 or 9 years old when he took to the throne. He became a cultural phenomenon when his tomb was discovered almost completely intact in 1922. His pyramid sits in the Valley of Kings in Thebes, modern Luxor, which is in Egypt. Unlike the Great Pyramid, Tutankhamun's tomb was covered in beautiful wall decorations. The walls told the story of how he would travel to the afterlife through the underworld. Egyptians believed all people would have to take this journey, so they would fill their tombs with objects and paintings to help them get there. There'd also be spells painted on the walls. They believed this would help people pass over to the next realm. The journey would be pretty long, and for that reason, the ancient Egyptians would also fill the pyramids with food. Tutankhamun's pyramid was filled with 8 fruit baskets. They even found something called gingerbread fruit in there. The rooms were jam-packed with furniture, statues, clothes, and staffs, amongst a whole bunch of other things. You'd likely find a lot of clothes and expensive jewelry in the pyramids as well. The ancient Egyptians wanted their ancestors to travel in style to the afterlife. They put Tutankhamun in his final resting place with over 50 pieces of clothing, all of the highest quality. There were tunics, scarves, gloves, and headdresses, and a ton of jewelry. Bracelets, pendants, necklaces, rings, and scarabs for protection were all found inside. Each of them was made of gold or precious stones. There were also fans made of ostrich feathers to keep the old pharaoh cool in the hot Egyptian sun. But the temperature inside the pyramids never actually went above 68 degrees Fahrenheit. The ancient Egyptians developed a super cool air conditioning system that we don't fully understand even today. Tutankhamun's pyramid also contained 130 walking sticks made from ebony, ivory, silver, and gold to help him on his journey. There were 3 chariots hidden away in case he got tired of all the walking. They also put 11 boat paddles inside, but there was no sign of any boat. The pyramids would be littered with the pharaoh's favorite scents and perfumes. During the excavation of Tutankhamun's pyramid, it quickly became clear that it had been robbed during ancient times. There was damage to doors and traces of oils left in empty jars. It looks like someone raided the pyramid for gold and the scents, perfumes, and oils that had been left for King Tut. There was still a bit of perfume, which was made from coconut oil and frankincense, left in one bottle. It seems like Pharaoh Tutankhamun loved board games. There was an ivory traveling set of senet in his pyramid. Although we don't know for sure exactly how to play it, we have figured out it was sort of an ancient Egyptian version of backgammon. It looks like it was a 2-player game where the goal was to knock your opponent off the board. Not really sure who Tutankhamun's mummy was supposed to play with though. The ancient Egyptians had some rituals that may seem pretty strange to us. For example, they used to shave their eyebrows off if they ever lost a cat. So it's not too surprising they put some really weird things inside pyramids. Archaeologists discovered a collection of mummified cats and scarab beetles in pyramids that date back more than 4,000 years. They were found in the pyramids of Saqqara, which is south of Cairo. They also found a bunch of makeup kits and mirrors inside. Makeup was worn proudly by both men and women in ancient Egyptian times. Eyeliner was the most popular cosmetic. The Rosetta Stone was one of the best discoveries ever made in pyramids. It was found by our man Napoleon Bonaparte and his team. It's a black granite rock that dates back to 196 BCE. It's transcribed in Greek, Demotic, and hieroglyphic. When it was translated in 1822, we got the key to understanding ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics for the very first time. The discovery of Queen Hatshepsut's mummy in 1903 changed our understanding of the Egyptians forever. After she had passed away, her successor, Thutmose III, removed most of the evidence of her reign, so we basically knew nothing about Egypt's first great female leader. She's now gone on to become one of the few and most famous female pharaohs of Egypt. Pharaoh Khufu even had a fully fledged boat in his pyramid. Archaeologists uncovered more than 1,200 pieces of a giant boat near the Great Pyramid at Giza. They reassembled the boat, and it's a whopping 144 feet long. It's most likely a solar boat, which was designed to carry the resurrected king with the deity Ra. Fun fact, the Pyramid of Giza is the last remaining of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. The other 6 are the Hanging Gardens, the Colossus, the Temple of Artemis, the Mausoleum, the Lighthouse, and the Statue of Zeus. This pyramid was also the world's tallest man-made structure for 3,800 years, and it's the biggest pyramid in Egypt. It took a staggering 2.3 million blocks of limestone, and some weighed as much as 80 tons. It took an incredible 100,000 laborers and a whopping 23 years to build. Its original height was a mega 480 feet. In 2017, archaeologists discovered something weird about Egypt's Great Pyramid. There's a hidden void that's at least 100 feet long, and no one really knows why it's there or what's actually inside it. The weird void is the first inner structure discovered within the 4,500-year-old pyramid since the 1800s. Scientists used cosmic rays to detect the massive hole, but are still no closer today to finding out what's inside. The ancient Egyptians took a lot of care building the pyramids, and everything was strategically placed and structurally sound, so it's super unlikely that this hole is due to blocks falling over time. Loads of pyramids also contain small model figurines called ushabti. These represented attendants. They believed they would come to life to serve the pharaohs in the afterlife. But it's amazing that all this stuff actually fit inside. There isn't actually a huge amount of space inside the structures. It's mostly just rock.